County Board to order. If everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Following the pledge, remain standing for a silent moment of reflection, and then supervisors, if you would all remain standing for your oath of office. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone but supervisors may be seated. And then supervisors, if you would raise your right hand and repeat after me, please. I, and then state your name, who has been duly elected to the office of Marathon County Board Supervisor, but yet have not yet entered on the duties thereof, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability. So help me God. Thank you. You may be seated. I will ask Corp Counsel to pass around your oath of office. If you'll find your name and sign your name next to that, please. Thank you. The organizational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, on Tuesday, April 16th at 7 p.m., and the agenda was duly signed and posted. If I could ask everyone to please make sure your electronic devices and cell phones are silenced or mute so as not to disturb the meeting. Next on the agenda is roll call, but before we proceed to roll call, I would like to recognize Corp Counsel for a comment, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make the board aware there was a recount for the County Board District 16 supervisor that was completed on Friday of last week. The results of that election did not change as a result of the recount. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 9.01 sub 6A, the non-prevailing candidate in a recount has 5 business days from the completion of the recount to appeal that result to the circuit court. That 5-day period does not expire until next Monday, April 22nd. In the event that a recount is requested for a particular election, the county clerk cannot certify that election and issue a certificate of election until the time allowed for filing an appeal for the recount has passed. So the District 16 supervisor cannot be sworn in until that certificate of election is issued. So tonight, there will not be a supervisor for District 16 seated for tonight's meeting. That will likely be remedied next Tuesday, but just so everyone is aware.
Thank you. And if you would please sign in on open meetings, we will take the roll.
Mine's waiting for the roll to be called.
I'm sorry. I clicked once and then I had to click one more time. My apologies. Supervisor Shadeborn, I can mark you as present. Thank you. All right, we have 35 members present. I'd like to welcome all the guests that we have with us tonight, either here in the audience or watching at home via public access. Thank you for joining us. At this time, I will formally open the floor for nominations for the position of County Board Chairperson. Historically, nominations of individual supervisors have been made by motion and second. The moving supervisor, the seconding supervisor, and other supporting supervisors are allowed to make statements of support regarding the nominee's candidacy. If you intend to make such a statement, I ask that you please ask to be recognized by the chair using your open meetings request to speak. The board's rules relative to decorum of comments will be enforced during the nomination process. I will then ask if all nominations have been received, and upon receipt of nominations, but prior to the vote, each nominee will be given an opportunity to address the board regarding their candidacy. And I will open meetings discussion for you to make motions for nomination for candidates. Supervisor Mask.
Thank you. I would like to nominate Kurt Gibbs for chair. I do believe that he is capable of leading us on with all of his past experience, and I hope that you'll all support him.
Thank you. Is there a second? If you can use open meetings to make a second. You're not able to do that? Okay. We have a second recorded by Supervisor Zhang. Is that what, and then it went away?
Yes, I second.
Okay. Well. You know what? I put in here because it was no vote required on that. It will not allow me to have a motion and a second. So let me fix that real quickly. Supervisor Mask with the motion, Supervisor Zhang with the second. Thank you. Any other nominations for County Board Chair? Any other nominations for County Board Chair? Is that 3? Okay. Since there is only one nomination for chairperson, it would be procedurally appropriate for a member to move to cast a unanimous ballot in lieu of initiating the voting process by secret ballot. And I will take that motion without open meetings because then I'd have to add it in. Okay, is there a motion to cast a unanimous ballot? Supervisor Opel with the motion, Supervisor Poole with the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. And the motion is carried. Thank you. We have a chairperson, Chair Gibbs.
First, I want to express my sincere thank you to everyone for the vote of confidence and vote of support. It's humbling, and I will try to do my best job that I can for you in delivering what is to be the work of this board for the citizens of Marathon County. So thank you for that. And I also want to express my sincere thank you to each and every one of you for willingness to serve on the board for the citizens of Marathon County. We will move on. And I will entertain motions for vice chair of the board. Supervisor Arstead.
I would like to nominate Chris Dickinson for vice chair.
Okay. Supervisor Drabeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to nominate John Robinson for vice chair. Please.
I need a, excuse me, I need a second for Supervisor Dickinson first. Okay, Supervisor Covelli with the second? Okay, Supervisor Ritter with the second. Okay, and then now Supervisor Drabeck.
Thank you, sir. I was nominating John Robinson for vice chair.
Okay, we have Supervisor Robinson. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Mask. Is there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Okay. Motion. Supervisor Hoppa, please.
You need to use the microphone to speak. He's already been nominated.
Supervisor Dickinson has been nominated and seconded. Is there any other nominations? Is there any other nominations?
Sorry, Supervisor Hardinger, you're looking quizzically at me. Okay.
Okay, is there any other nominations? I guess I would entertain a motion to close nominations. Motion by Supervisor Opal and second by Supervisor Vall to close nominations. Any discussion? All those in favor of closing nominations signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nominations are closed, and we will now take and allow each of the candidates to address the board. And we'll start with the first nomination, and that is Supervisor Dickinson. You're more than welcome to come up here.
Good evening. I'll promise Supervisor Boots that I won't speak for 20 minutes if he promises not to attempt to call a question tonight. So a little bit of humor. So I'm Chris Dickinson. I'm supervisor for District 29, representing 5 communities in the Stratford area. This is my 3rd term on the Marathon County Board. I've also been on the Stratford Board of Education the past 14 years, chosen by my peers the last 5 years as president, and the previous 9 years as vice president. I'm asking for your vote for vice chair of the Marathon County Board. In our rules, there's a list of duties assigned to the vice chair. In short, be a member of the executive committee, connect with standing committee chairs, preside over the rules review process, assume the chair position in the chair's absence, and provide leadership to the comprehensive and strategic plan process. I will speak to all 5 of those major duties. First, I've already been a member of the executive committee, nominated and elected by the previous board in 2022 as an at-large member. I had your support then. I took that role seriously as a representative of all board members in that process and was an active participant. I interacted with all standing committee chairs, something the vice chair must do. Being on exec brought me a greater understanding of the importance of our committees and the relationships among the committees and the full board. Second, I have already been a member of the Rules Review Committee. I was appointed to Rules Review by the current chair, who was the previous chair, and the board, and I had your support then. I have great interest in policy and rules, as Corporation Counsel Perner can attest to, as I have had many dealings with him trying to find language for changes and resolutions. On rules, I tried to find opportunities to improve our governance, make rules clearer, and align them to a changing board. I will, as vice chair, make the rules review process more efficient, result-oriented, so that in 2026, the next board will more clearly see what the changes were and why. And I mention that because that's something that actually happened in conversation with Corporation Counsel Perner about the red line information that you have in your packet, which you didn't have before. Third, I've already been a vice chair, both of Infrastructure Committee and the Central Wisconsin Airport Board the past 2 years. These 2 years, combined with my 9 years as vice president of the Stratford Board of Education, have given me a complete understanding of a vice chair position, especially collaboration with the chair to keep the board focused on results. And in all 3 cases, I have had to fill in as chair or president when that person could not fulfill their duties. In infrastructure, when Supervisor McEwen had his issues, I worked well with Commissioner Griesbach and Administrator Leonard to set agendas, and I chaired those meetings efficiently and effectively. At CWA, I filled in for Portage County Supervisor Laddick on several occasions. In both of those instances, county-related, I received very positive feedback from many, including Supervisor Robinson, Administrator Leonard, and Airport Director Grief. Fourth, that same leadership has been evident in the Stratford School District in regard to planning. 2 years ago, we hired a new superintendent. He had a lot of ideas. The board and the new superintendent set a goal to redevelop the vision of our district with a new strategic plan. We surveyed the community, parents, staff, spoke with business leaders. We developed a framework for the process, created goals, and frequently met to discuss our progress. The result was the creation of new core values based on our mission and vision statements and 4 new foundational pillars, of course, student achievement being the first. But it was followed by developing and retaining staff, building community partnerships, and effective communication, all items which we would want here on the county board as well. Likewise, I was involved in the county board's update on the strategic plan this past term, and am familiar with what this work entails, and I will provide similar guidance and leadership. Finally, what is critically important for the vice chair is to be a listener and collaborator. It is less about driving conversation at a meeting in one of those seats, and more about understanding the conversation that's happening in the room, hearing what people have to say, and looking for opportunities to find consensus. Conversations with the chair I will take very importantly, and the county administrator and department heads and the like, to set us on a course for good planning and good results. These qualities have always been what I have displayed when I've either chaired or vice chaired a meeting, either here or in the school district. In closing, I believe I have demonstrated I can do this job. In many ways, like I said, I've already been doing the work, and there is nothing beyond my capabilities, I don't believe. You can be assured I will collaborate with the chair to do the good work of the county and will well represent this board. I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson.
First of all, I want to thank you for your willingness to serve and welcome those new members to the county board. Tip O'Neill, the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, once said that all politics is local. And it is at the local level where really one can have an impact on that process. Tonight we have the opportunity to choose our leadership for the next 2 years. And in doing so, I would ask that you consider the records of those seeking the position. Last year, in response to concerns over the budget process, we revised the budget process to make it more inclusive, to make sure that all members of the county board could be involved in setting priorities, working on the process, and reviewing fees for those programs. And more work needs to be done, but we made some significant improvements. We also worked to expand the role of vice chairs of the standing committees in terms of participation in the executive committee and working on implementation of the strategic plan. I had the pleasure of working with Allison Leahy and the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee in setting agendas, creating a work plan, and tasked her with leading a work group that revised and reformed our capital improvement process. My approach has been one of working for the needs of the county in those areas. In one of those areas has been in the area of broadband expansion. While I represent the city of Wausau, there was a need to make sure that all residents have access to reliable and dependable broadband services. We have made significant strides to ensure that people have access to the internet, but there's still 15,000 people who are under or unserved in the county, and more work needs to be done. It's important for their ability to telework, access telehealth, education, and connect with families. Over the past few years, I've worked with the internet service providers, local government, and citizens to address the needs of our residents, attending countless Towns Association meetings and working with others. When the American Rescue Plan funds were released to the county, we took the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee on the road to listen to the citizens and how we should spend those funds and develop and set our priorities. Those efforts reflect a commitment to address the needs of the residents of the county. While politics is local, we can't do it alone. Counties are creatures of the state of Wisconsin, and our duties and our authority is limited. With my experience and the former experience on the city council, as mayor, as a state representative, I think that I can offer an understanding of how those various levels of government can work together to solve problems. If elected chair, I want to continue the process of engaging all of you in the development of the budget, work with you on updating both the comprehensive and the strategic plan, and work on developing future leaders for the county board through mentoring, education, and providing opportunities for members to learn and participate in the governing process. I would appreciate your support.
Okay, I'll have the Corp Counsel explain the secret ballot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the vote for officers of the county board, including the vice chair in this case, is done by secret ballot per Wisconsin statute. The clerk and assistant clerk are passing out blank slips of paper on which to write your vote. Without objection by the body, they'll also act as ballot clerks to tally the votes. So once you write down your vote, please fold your paper twice, return it to the ballot clerks, either Kim or David. Once all the votes are cast, the ballot clerks will compile and tally the votes. They'll independently verify the total number and then provide those totals to the chair to be announced for the election.
Okay. It's not going to work.
And the election results are Supervisor Dickinson with 19 and Supervisor Robinson with 16. Supervisor Dickinson is the new vice chair. Okay, we will move on to ordinances. Action will be taken at today's meeting. We have the education presentation of the county board rules. And I ask the Corp Counsel, Micah Purner, to go through the presentation of the rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it possible to put the agenda up there? Thank you so much. Yep. Excuse my scrolling here. I trust that you all just read that as I scrolled through it. I'm just kidding. Okay. So the draft rules are going to be before you, along with, in the packet, there's a red line document that outlines the difference between the rules that were operative for the previous term and the proposed rule document before you today. When you move the rules to the floor, that document with the red line changes is the one that's in front of you. The rules operate as the rules of procedure or the bylaws for the board as it deliberates and operates throughout the rest of the term. Your vote to adopt a set of rules is a majority vote today and today only. After adoption, the rules can be amended during the board's term by a 2/3 majority vote. So they're not written in stone, but they are written in pen. They're not as easy to change, but they are changeable. The rules that are before you are those that were proposed by the Rules Review Committee from last term after reviewing the rules that are currently in effect. That review occurs every 2 years. The rules are an evolving document. If you read through them, many of the rules have existed substantially unchanged for many years. Many are interdependent with one another. So part of the rules review process every 2 years is to ensure internal consistency with any proposed changes. Many of the rules are created to reflect applicable state law, such as for the appointment of members of committees, boards, and commissions. I want to go through and highlight some of the areas of the rules, as well as some of the changes that were proposed by the previous board. Many of the red line items were cleanup ideas offered to make the rules more readable. Things such as changing the word telephonic to the word audiovisual to make it consistent with other areas of the rule, things like that. But there are some substantive changes that I'll try to touch on as well. So, starting at the top. So, Rule 1 is the rule that outlines the holding and timing of full county board meetings and attendance. In Rule 1F, thank you to Vice Chair Dickinson for pointing this out earlier. The meeting attendance area was not changed from last year beyond some minor language changes. So when you look at that Rule 1F, as it's currently written and currently proposed, there is still an ability to appear virtually for voting meetings with the county board chair's approval. Rule 2 relates to quorum. Rule 3 contains a set of procedural rules that are applicable to the full board meetings. A couple things to note that Rule 3B was updated upon recommendation of the prior Rules Review Committee to make the process for having an item taken up by committees or the full board clearer and more transparent with specific timeframes that were identified. In Rule 3E, there is now proposed to be a rule that enshrines the county's historical practice for calling the question. So that alters Robert's rules, allows debate to be ended without a vote on calling the question if there's no objection to the question being called. It also enters into the rules that if you're in the queue to speak, you still have the opportunity to speak even after the question has been called. Again, that had been historical practice, but it wasn't consistent with Robert's rules, which is why it was added here. Rule 4 identifies the presiding officer in absence of the chair. Rule 5 talks to the rules for the election of the officers that we just went through. Rule 6 outlines the chairperson's duties. And the one change I would note in that section is the board chair's role as an ex officio member of all committees and commissions. If you read Robert's rules, an ex officio member can vote. However, our historical practice has been that the chair doesn't vote unless he's an appointed member of a committee. So we made that consistent with our practice instead of relying on a wrong interpretation of Robert's rules. Rule 7 outlines the vice chairperson's duties. Rule 8 discusses each supervisor's authority to speak during meetings and the rules applicable to speaking on behalf of the full board. Rule 9 addresses non-members interacting with the board. There were some additions to 9B relative to public comment, including a maximum of 3 minutes per commenter and rules of decorum. There's also a new rule about public hearings, adding the same time frames that are applicable to public comment. In Rule 10, the general agenda and timing guidelines for full county board meetings is outlined. One addition that's proposed here is to specifically identify the purpose of agendas and informational packets. We hadn't really had full definition of those before. Rule 11 discusses voting. Rule 12 relates to committees, commissions, and task forces. So some of the major red lines or blue lines in the case of what's on the screen were, when I was reading through the rules, there were some rules that applied to both committees and to the full board, but they were written in a way that you couldn't really tell which one applied to which. So now there's a very clear delineation between the rules of the board and then the rules that apply to committees, commissions, and task forces in Rule 12. Rule 13 talks about the appointment process for those committees, boards, and commissions. Pretty reflective of, well, not pretty, reflective of state statute. Rule 14 talks about how you appoint a committee, board, commission, or task force, or create one that does not previously exist. Rule 15 talks about the procedural rules that apply to committee meetings. That rule also outlines the dates and the times for committee meetings. You'll notice that those dates and times are set up specifically to coincide with their relationship to the week of the first Thursday of each month. And the reason for that is to ensure that there's a process by which items considered by a committee can be forwarded to the full board and taken up in a timely manner. So those dates and times are very interdependent with the schedule of the county board meeting and the schedule of all the other committee meetings. Rule 16 outlines the responsibilities of the chairs and vice chairs of subordinate bodies, committees, commissions, etc. Rule 17 talks about the fact that one single committee cannot override the recommendation of any other committee. And if two committees have conflicting recommendations on one item, the recommendation from the standing committee of origin is the one that's offered to the board, but ultimately the board decides what to do. Rule 18 is a good and important read for all supervisors. It's your guidelines and expectations and also has your conflict of interest and ethics code internally. Rule 19 sets forth your salaries and compensation. Just a note that you cannot change your own salaries and compensation. So an amendment to that section would likely be out of order today. Rule 20 sets forth the process for reimbursement of expenses and travel. Rule 21 is the administrator's work plan and evaluation. There was some changes here to improve the readability of the administrator's evaluation. It was tough to slog through. It probably still is, but maybe a little less so now. Rule 22 governs the approval of joint ventures in which the county incurs increased liability. It's very reflective of state statute in regards to specific instances where statutes apply a process. I'm fell behind, but Section 202 of our rules talks about fiscal impact requirements, the supermajority requirement for budget amendments, which is also a state law. There is a change there. If I can find it. So one of these sections, subsection 5, is removed from the current draft. The reason is I've read that many, many times. You can see my comment in the red line. I don't know what that means. And if someone asked me to do that, I wouldn't know what to tell them. So if I don't know what it means and no one knows what it means, including the previous corporation counsel who was in my chair for many, many years, the thought was, well, we'll take it out. Section 2.03 just outlines the supervisory districts. You cannot change that, so please don't try. 2.04 outlines the various standing committees, membership and responsibilities for each committee. Subsection 3 in the executive committee section, the membership was updated to make it clear that if the vice chair of the board is also the chair of a standing committee, the vice chair of that standing committee also becomes a member of the executive committee. And also to note, there will be an election next Tuesday. We've had so much fun with elections recently. We're going to do another one for the 2 at-large members of the executive committee. So stay tuned, unless you change that rule tonight, in which case we won't have an election. There is an addition in the rule related to Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee, where they are also tasked with proposing a resolution relative to budget process and timeline. We did remove the Regional Morgue Task Force from the rules, not because they did anything wrong, but because they reached their goal of having a plan and funding for that project. And there was also, somewhere in here, a metallic mining committee added to section 2.05. It wasn't actually added. It should have been incorporated into your rules in 2018, but it never was. So it was created by ordinance in 2018, but it never made the rules. So this adopts that language from 2018 and actually puts them in. Here it is. That's my not brief overview of the rules. And of course, if you have questions, I'm here to do my best to answer.
So I'll open it up for questions. Okay, we will then move on to item 11 on the agenda, Chapter 2 of the General Code of Marathon County County Board Rules of Procedure to include chairperson's guidelines and expectations as referenced in the county board rules. Ordinance 0-11-24. Do I have a motion? Motion by Supervisor Robinson, second by Supervisor Hart. Any discussion? Supervisor Langenhan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a question for Corporation Counsel. Why was the TIF task force language left in on page 52? I think it's on page 115 of the packet. That should have sunsetted. I think that should not be in here. Am I correct, or am I misunderstanding something?
It would have sunset. I mean, by April 30 or by March 31st of this year was the last part of its timeline. It didn't specifically sunset as operation of the order. There wasn't any sunset language in there, and it wasn't specifically discussed at rules review. It certainly would be an amendment that would be in order, not to hint on anything, but it seems like that would be appropriate.
Thank you. I'll be thinking on that.
Supervisor Sandusky, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to make an amendment to Rule 10E on the agendas and the packets. Maybe you could bring up the rule on there,
Yes.
or if you just bring up the rule and I can.
One moment, please. Okay.
Okay, so I want to add on 10E1 after the first part. Okay, so I want to, it says meeting agendas. The purpose of the meeting agendas of the board and its subsequent bodies is to provide proper public notice to meeting pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.84. It is the goal of the county board that agendas for meetings of Board of Supervisors and its subsequent bodies be posted no later than Friday before the week of the meeting. And I would like to add after that, for meetings of the County Board of Supervisor, in additions, if any additions or changes to an agenda occur after Friday immediately prior to the next scheduled monthly business meeting of the Board of Supervisors, the county clerk shall notify all supervisors of such additions or changes by electronic mail. And the last one was on number 4. I'll read the first part. Timing of the packet items to provide sufficient time for staff responsible for posting legal notice, the agenda informational packet materials, including PowerPoint presentations, written reports, and minutes of previous meetings that should be provided to the county clerk no later than noon on the Friday preceding the meeting date. And then I want to add, for the meetings of the County Board of Supervisors, any additions or changes to the informational packet occur after Friday up to immediately prior to the next scheduled monthly business meeting of the Board of Supervisors. The clerk shall notify all supervisors of such additions or electronic changes by electronic mail. My reasoning is this will be very beneficial to all the board members, actually, in an effort to help eliminate surprises when it comes down to the meeting. In my 2-year tenure here on the board, one thing that was kind of frustrating when the agenda and the non-agenda packet would come on Friday, which was really good. So you'd have the weekend to read over it, the packet and the agenda. But then when you come in on the Tuesday meetings, sometimes if you didn't get time to look at it the prior day, there may be a whole bunch of extra information on there, and having the clerk notify people in an email, that way they don't have to go through the whole entire packet and try to figure out what changes are. So if any questions, I can answer them.
Okay, first, is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Supervisor Hardinger. Is there any discussion on the amendment? The clerk is asked to address the board. Is there any objection to the clerk addressing the board? Without objection, Clerk Trueblood, please.
I guess a point of clarification, perhaps. If you are asking for an email every single time the packet is updated, I updated it 3 times today. Do you want an email to go out every time it's updated, and then if I update it and then someone says, oh, here's something else we need to add 30 minutes later or an hour later, another email go out to everyone? I guess as a point of my workflow in my office, I would just like to have some clarification on that. Thank you.
Maybe if you could just do like daily, like say if the Monday prior, do it once, and then once on Tuesday, get an email out just with the additions, so that people know like ahead of time, because I feel like you get where I'm coming from. Like you got you got 200-300 pages you got to go through, and you add extra pages, or you might change some pages or something in the process. If you email them, then we know right where to look instead of looking through the whole packet again.
Because it's not clear in talking to Corp Counsel, I think we need some clarity. If we're going to ask the clerk to send out an email If an email by 4:30 of the day that there's changes made, or, if that's the intent, rather than each time that there's an amendment, I think we need something that's clear as to what we want in those rules, because without clarity, it clearly is up to the interpretation. It says, you want to have a notification of a change. Well, again, is that within 30 minutes of the change? Is it within, or is it by 4:30 of the day that the change occurred? I think we need to have some kind of clarity in the amendment to ensure that it's at least a responsibility that the clerk would take on if that's what we want.
Would excuse me, would like 1 o'clock each day be a fair time? Because
Well,
then
I think it would make sense to have that at the end of the day, you're not going to receive additional, because otherwise you're going to have carryover days. Somebody comes in at 2 o'clock, she sends out the email at 1 o'clock, and then lo and behold, there's a change because some additional information was added to the packet at 2 o'clock. Now she's going to have to try to remember to do it by 1 o'clock the following day, and that's why I think it would make sense if you had it at 4:30 the day that the change was, if there was multiple changes, one email notifying the supervisors that changes have been made to the agenda or changes have been made to the packet.
yeah, 4:30, I would go with that.
Because we're already in discussion, I'm going to need an amendment to the amendment to make clarity that there be a 4:30 deadline on the day that any changes happen. Supervisor Hardinger.
So having the clerk say that she's had this change it twice already today before this meeting, at the village level, there's a cutoff. The week prior, close of business that Wednesday, nothing is going to be added to the agenda, the packet, nothing last minute, so none of us are hit on the drive in here trying to get caught up on, last minute changes to the meeting. So I don't know if this would be an amendment to what was presented or because it sounds like you mentioned, Mr. Chair, like close of business for 4:30 of the day, nothing past that. Do I make an amendment to, how about close of business the Wednesday previous to the meeting? The prior Wednesday? We're getting kind of foggy now, I feel like.
I believe also, I'll have Corp Counsel address.
Sir, sure. I just want to clarify if I'm understanding correctly. It sounds like what you're suggesting is that the proposed amendment be amended to basically close the packet at 4:30 on the Wednesday preceding the upcoming county board meeting, so that nothing could be added after that?
I'd like that. I'll motion for that.
Okay.
Great suggestion.
Okay.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, so that now
I'm gonna write something and then read it.
Okay, I'm going to have Corp Counsel write and then read to the board what the clarity is, because I think we've got two different potential, we've got the one motion, now we have an amendment, but I think the amendment actually strips out the notification, because the agendas and the packets now then are saying they're going to be out by Wednesday prior to the meetings. If I understand Supervisor Hardinger, your motion or amendment is that the packet and the agendas can't change after Wednesday, close on Wednesday, prior to the meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. And Supervisor Sandowski, if this is okay with you, I'll withdraw my amendment, and I could withdraw my second if that's an opportunity to kind of clear this up. Would that be better for Corporation Counsel? I feel like it might be. We just make a fresh motion.
Okay.
Just change that one word in the other rule to must.
So let me throw this out there. I want to make sure that I'm capturing the will of the board here. So it sounds like the intent here is to close any additions to the agenda or the packet. And our current rule says the agenda gets posted the Friday before the week of the meeting. So we could just say then that the agenda and the packet won't change after 4:30 on the Friday before the upcoming voting meeting. Something more articulate than that I'll write out, but if
If that's the will of the board, I think what you could capture is that the packet and the agenda is basically closed and can't be amended or changed after 4:30 on Friday prior to the meeting. If that's the case, we've got a second on an amendment to the amendment. We got to vote. The suggestion to the board would be that we vote down both the amendment to the amendment, vote down the amendment, and then offer a clean amendment to say that the packet will not change after Friday at 4:30, prior to the meeting. Is everybody clear what we're looking at? So again, the amendment to the amendment would be, needed to be voted down. The amendment voted down, and then a new amendment offered, cleaning up and saying simply that the packet and the agenda cannot be amended after 4:30 on Friday prior to the meeting. Is that suitable with the maker of the original amendment and?
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that for sure. Because it's just a matter of getting sprung upon and things keep changing and you don't have, so that I'm definitely in favor of that. So that'd be perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So, by Jasper. So what's on the floor is the amendment to the amendment. Again, and so now my recommendation, if it's the will of the board, is to vote down the amendment to the amendment, and then vote down the amendment, and then offer a clean amendment to basically say the packet and the agenda cannot be amended after Friday prior to the meeting. Everybody clear? We're voting on the amendment to the amendment now, and the recommendation is to vote it down. So we're in voting mode, so everybody should receive the ability to vote on the amendment to the amendment on your electronic devices. Okay.
So just clarifying, we're first voting on the amendment to the amendment, which was offered by Supervisor Hardinger. And then, so that's the vote in front of you. On the amendment to the amendment, the suggestion was to vote down the amendment to the amendment and then offer a new amendment. Have I said amendment enough today? Which would give us a clean slate to offer that new amendment with the language that we've been discussing.
And so we're at voting now on the amendment to the amendment that was offered by Supervisor Hardinger.
Is your vote yes? Okay.
Yes. And we'll proceed. And the motion fails. And so now we're to the amendment that was offered by Supervisor Sandalski. And again, the recommendation was to vote that down and offer a clean amendment stating that, so we're at any further discussion on that amendment? Supervisor Hoppe? You had request to speak? Okay. So is everybody clear on what we're voting on now? We're voting on the amendment that was offered by Supervisor Sandalski. And again, the recommendation is, or the suggestion is to vote that down and then offer a clean amendment. Is everybody clear? We'll proceed.
Yes. Okay.
I think you want to vote no. That's fine. Proceed. And the motion is failed. So now we're back to the rules as they were presented. And now, what is your pleasure? Does somebody want to offer that motion? Supervisor Sandalski.
I would like to make an motion to amend the rules to say after Friday 4:30, all the packet and the agenda are closed for revisions. Anytime after that, up to the meeting.
Okay, is there a second? Oh, I gotta have the clerk get the motion in first. Yeah.
And
Corp Counsel is going to clarify so that we get the wording correct.
can I clarify and maybe offer a suggestion as to language? So E1, at the end of E1 as currently written, we could add no changes may be made to a meeting agenda after 4:30 p.m. of the Friday prior to the scheduled meeting date. And then that same change goes into E4. No changes may be made to a meeting informational packet after 4:30 p.m. of the Friday prior to a scheduled meeting date. And then
that'd be good.
just to be clear, this would apply to the county board and to any subordinate bodies, because that's how these rules are written.
Yeah, that'd be excellent.
Is there a second? Okay, Supervisor Hardinger with a second. Supervisor Boots.
So I can appreciate the amendment. We're going to have a lot of special meetings because when things come last minute to a standing committee, which they do, and let's say, for instance, I'll just take my committee last time, public safety. If something comes up on that Monday afternoon, hey, we need this done before we're going to be putting together a special meeting because we're pretty much taking this out of the circulation. I mean, was it that big of an issue the first time around, I guess, is my question. So I guess I will be voting it down, but.
Supervisor Robinson?
I too have some concerns, and I think if you're looking for transparency, this is not that. There are numerous times where we will get last-minute information in, and what you're going to do is change from being able to distribute it as part of the packet to having handouts on the floor the day of the meeting. And that will really reduce the amount of notice that you will have. So I want to have you take a thoughtful approach to this. And there are numerous times where we are amending agendas because of circumstances beyond our control, external forces, or we're bringing something in for a transfer of funds because something came up at the last minute. This would preclude those from happening. I don't think that that's been abused, but you're really restricting the ability to share information before the meeting. And many times we get PowerPoint presentations from speakers that is put into the packet right before the meeting so we can follow along. That would be precluded under this scenario. I think it won't have the intended results and may actually reduce the transparency information that will be available for you to make those decisions.
Administrator Leonard would like to address the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was certainly I appreciate the intent, and I was just saying to Vice Chair Dickinson, I know we need to do better. Kim and I have had this conversation a number of times about trying to get information as promptly as we can. I can appreciate the intent that we try to do that. My concern is one that Chair Boots and previous committee chair Boots, Supervisor Boots, referenced, it may, and as well as Supervisor Robinson, it may lead to less transparency. One of the occasions when we do add things to packets on occasion is when a supervisor is considering offering a substitute resolution. And oftentimes those things do come in as you referenced Supervisor Sandelsky. The supervisor has the opportunity to think about it over the weekend. They draft a substitute, we put it in the packet. Or things do come up that require the amendment of the agenda. Otherwise, you are going to have those special meetings. And I don't, ultimately, my job is to affect the will of the board. I hear you saying we need to do better about getting information in the packet, and I can certainly work with the department heads to strive to do that and improve the timeliness. We also can, I think the notification piece is something we can certainly work on doing. That doesn't restrict your access to information. It just makes you more aware of it, quite frankly, if we do amend the packet or the agenda, rather than sending that information to the specific committees, which Kim does. We simply can send it to the full board. I don't know, Kim, if that is something operationally you think we can handle on a daily basis.
Supervisor Zhang, next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to express my appreciation to Supervisor Sandelsky for the attempts to try and encourage transparency. But I too have concerns, and I echo and concur with Supervisor Robinson and Supervisor Boots. I mean, I still recall several issues, such as when we're going to bonds, and and the fact that we have to meet prior to the board meetings as well, or even contracts that has not been prepared or is not ready in time as well. And I think this is actually going to make it more complicated and less transparent than the intention. So I will be voting against this amendment as well.
Supervisor Gisselman, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm concerned about public notice. Doesn't the Wisconsin statute speak to a 24-hour notice? I mean, does the public of Marathon County know what we're talking about if agendas are changed or materials are changed on the spot? I think that they are listening to us right now, and I think that they have one aspect of knowing what we're talking about by the published agenda, which should be 24 hours ahead of the posted meeting. And if that changes within that time and they're not aware of what we're talking about, they cannot come and make public comment. If they're not aware of something coming before this body on the spot, how can they come and make public comment and tell us what we should do? Because we should be listening to that public comment. And I would think that unless they know, and according to as far as I read the Wisconsin statutes, that public notice, that agenda should be 24 hours in advance. I would think we should be doing that now. But if I'm hearing things right tonight, agendas change within the day. Well, no, packets may change. I understand that. Packets may change in addition to, but I think that people go into that county calendar and look and see what we're talking about and the information that we're in front of. So I don't know. I think somebody has to explain to me what we're going to be doing differently with this amendment, so that the packet cannot change. But I'm concerned about the public notice, that they know exactly what we're talking about, and things delivered on the spot, I don't think is a good thing. Thank you.
Well, first off, let me clarify. The agendas are never changed inconsistent with state statute. Agendas may be amended, but they're always amended at a minimum of 24 hours in advance of the meeting, unless it's an actual declared emergency, which has only happened twice in my 10 years as chair. And then it was under our rules that it convened a special committee. So the agendas are not changed within the 24 hours prior to notification, consistent with state statutes. What we're talking about in some cases is the packet changing, additional information coming forward that is being shared with the board in the packet. That could change, in fact, changed 3 times today. But that was at the request of some supervisors wanting additional information in the packet. So that's what was changed. The amendment that's been offered would tie the hands. The clerk would no longer be allowed to amend the packet, nor would be allowed to amend the agenda, again, 24 hours in advance, but not be allowed to amend the agendas for any committees or subcommittees if after the meeting is, the agenda is posted on Friday prior to the meeting. So for example, next Tuesday's meeting is, and that packet will go out on Friday, nothing would be able to be changed in the packet or, according to the amendment, would not be allowed to change on the agenda, nor would anything be allowed to be changed in the packet on Friday. Now, that becomes really challenging when you're talking about meetings that are scheduled for Thursday prior, so almost a week in advance, the packet and the agenda is set. That's fine if that's the will of the board. I'm just telling you that there's many times when additional information has been gathered at the request of supervisors, and that's been disseminated. So the amendment right now would tie the hands that the clerk could not amend the agenda, nor could the chairs amend the agenda after Friday prior to the meeting scheduled. Again, meeting agendas are not changed inconsistent with state statutes. They are clearly always amended at a minimum of 24 hours in advance if they're amended. Supervisor Hardinger.
So I appreciate the discussion, Mr. Supervisor Boots and Zong and Robinson. The last thing I'm trying to do here is curb or not give any or less transparency, I guess. But and I understand the county is a much larger animal than the village. But if we set a standard that we need to have that information at a certain time, so that it doesn't change after the fact, I understand things happen, okay, but it's going to help the clerk. It's going to help prioritize the administrator and everybody else to say this is when it's going to need to happen. Get us the information we need by then. And there's got to be some middle ground where if you receive information or somebody receives information in that 2-day period that's going to be detrimental to the information of that packet in the public service, that we have to be able to have a middle ground there to meet it. My concern here is not only for the clerk, but for everybody on this board as well, to have the amount of time that we need to go through hundreds of pages of information. Now, I understand what you're saying, Chair Gibbs. I completely agree with you. The Friday before would not make sense, so maybe there needs to be an amendment to this, 2 business days prior. Then the actual meeting occurs, close of business. So if the meeting is on Thursday, in middle of the day, now we're getting real technical, but Monday night, but giving people not only on this board, but on your staff and the administrator and everybody else, this is when we need this information. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to change 18 times between now and then, and killing her in her schedule, and the rest of us trying to keep up with, okay, what happened between the time I got up this morning and I'm getting here this afternoon. And we set that policy at the village level, and it took a little bit of struggling, but everybody just got to it. Hey, if we don't have that information by now, close the business, the packet's going out, and ours is Wednesday, not Friday. Now, I understand we're 16,000, we're not the county. But, I mean, it set a standard that this is what we're going to do from here on out, so nobody's scrambling at the last minute trying to catch up with all this stuff. And that really is all my motivation behind this. And I understand there's a lot of stuff that changes every day. I get that. I get that a lot. But there's got to be like maybe a middle ground, or maybe we start something to say, okay, 2 days before, or 2 business days before, we got to have it out. Got to have it out, got to have it done. Now, if something and I don't know what you'd declare it to be, detrimental to the budget or detrimental to something, it's got to be added in the information or as an addendum. I don't know what that answer is on your level, but usually the clerk would bring it up to us, say, hey, listen, something came up, in the meeting itself when we addressed that item. And they said, okay, hey, listen, this is some information that we have, and I'm bringing it to your attention now that we're talking about it. So I don't know if it's an option. I just want to throw it out there, I guess.
Okay, Supervisor Langenhahn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think some of you on this board can still remember when we had paper packets, right? Remember those? They would come in the mail, and the information that came in there was fixed. Now, granted, I believe we still, at least the chairs at that time, had the ability to amend those agendas, of course, abiding by the open meetings law and the 24-hour notice, unless in the case of an emergency. I've been a committee chair for the past 6 years, and the one thing I will say generally is that anything that's going to limit my ability or any of my committee members' abilities to bring something to the committee's attention, or I can even just speak generally to the board's attention to address something that's very timely, I think it's an impractical rule. I have some doubts with setting those agendas in stone outside of that 24 hours notice. I think that limits our ability to be responsive to the public, and those are the people that we serve. In addition to that, if we're going to talk about agendas and packets, the other thing I would point out is that in a lot of the packets, in fact, I think all the packets, the agenda is already included in there. So that's going to produce confusion. If the agenda has been posted as part of the official notice, that changes, but the agenda that's included in the packet isn't, right? I think there's some practical things that need to be talked about a little bit more. I think those discussions can take place maybe amongst administration, like the administrator referred to. I don't think this is something that a rule can fix, right? I think that's where we're at right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. This is probably going to be a recurring theme tonight to Corp Council if there are more amendments, but I would like something on screen with the amendments spelled out in type. Thank you.
Supervisor Kroll, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say hi to everybody. Welcome. This is my first time here, so thank you. So for me personally, I'm really enjoying all the spirit of this discussion. And what I really wanted to lay out was I believe there is a middle ground, and that is essentially I would appreciate a summary of changes from Friday to up to 24 hours up to the post of the meeting. So we know that the agenda will probably not change within the 24 hours. However, in the packet, if we can have, if it's 1 or 2 sheets of paper, that it just specifically says these are the summary changes in the packets and the specific page numbers. There has been some concern that people have a hard time finding everything in the packet. So I think that can be a solid middle ground. And if anything in the packet had changed within the 24 hours, we are notified before the meeting. So if that's an amendment to the amendment, or if it's a whole nother amendment, or it's just the county clerk policy, we can have that discussion. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? Supervisor Hart, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to speak as I think one of the only other clerks that serves on this board, and a clerk that struggles with this same exact thing on the city side. I considered bringing forward an amendment to the rules that was similar to this, but I also had the same concerns of transparency, and I know that things happen at the last minute. So when considering this, I didn't bring anything forward because I kind of wanted to set an expectation to the administrator and department heads first to say, if we can respect the time of the clerk, if we can respect the time of not only the clerk, but see at the city, when things come forward, it isn't just that department or the clerk that has to put it in, it's the city attorney, it's the finance department, it's a lot of other components. And what often happens with us is I get sent stuff that haven't been vetted by those other departments, and then I have to struggle to get it vetted by those other departments. And it creates a backlog where almost every Friday before the city council comes out, I am at my desk 2-3 hours after 4:30 trying to get the packet out. And I do think that's a disservice, but also I don't know if we have a common ground here. So in thinking about all of this, I considered setting that expectation of having the packet out in time without creating a rule. But if it becomes a problem, and I know it's more difficult to pass a rule halfway through the term, but propose that if a majority of the board, or at that point 2/3 of the board, view that as a problem, bring that up and address it at that time if that expectation isn't being met. Thank you.
Supervisor Boots, please.
Call question.
Is there objection to, well, he's got to still go back until we adopt the rule. Is there objection to question being called? Is there any objection to question being called? There's no objection. I will proceed to vote. We need, this is one of those motions that does require 2/3 majority of the board to vote in favor of calling the question, which means that debate will end if a 2/3 majority of this board votes in favor of ending debate. And I need a second on the motion to call the question. And we have a second by Supervisor Pfifferich. Okay, Supervisor Opel was in the queue. Do you wish to address? Excuse me, we've got to vote on the motion to call question. So we're at the point of question being called. Again, a 2/3 majority does require to end debate. Yes, we'll end debate with 2/3 majority. Is everybody clear on what they're voting on? We'll proceed to vote.
Supervisor Shaneborn? I'm sorry, no?
Okay. And we'll proceed. And debate is ended, and we had one left in the queue, and that was Supervisor Opel. Supervisor Opel.
I was just going to well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was waiting for Supervisor Boots to act, and that was going to be my motion. But so.
Okay, debate has ended on the amendment, and I'll have the Corp Counsel try to clarify the motion that we have before the board.
I just wrote it, so it's on the screen in front of you in the highlights. Those are the proposed changes as I understand them.
Everybody clear? A yes vote will then change the rules to no changes can be made to the meeting agenda after 4:30 of Friday prior to the scheduled meeting date. And that applies to the board meeting, the education meeting. It also applies to all subordinate committees, all standing committees, and also the packet is the same. No changes to the packet will be made after 4:30 on Friday prior to the scheduled meeting. We will proceed to vote. A yes will approve the, Administrator Leonard first.
And again, of course, whatever the board decides, we'll do our best to do. I walked over and asked the clerk, based on the suggestion that was recently made by Supervisor Hart and Supervisor Kroll about if we do have an amendment to either an agenda or a packet after the time currently in the rule, I just inquired if Kim thought that was something we could send out an email, kind of going back to Supervisor Sandelski's original comment, and noting those changes. And her thought was consistent with mine that we can do that, and we'll endeavor to do that as timely as possible and give you that information. That wouldn't necessarily, it wouldn't necessitate an amendment to your rule, but then if we fall short, you certainly would have the ability to make those changes. Again, my only concern is based on the functioning of the board. If there is something that a chair of a committee wants to add to either an agenda or a packet, the rule as Corp Council has drafted would, I think the way we'd try to get around that is, as Supervisor Boots referenced, we'd schedule a special meeting, which I don't know would make anyone happy if you have to attend another meeting. But I just wanted to offer that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. We'll now proceed to vote.
Supervisor Shane Borden?
Supervisor Marshall? Okay, we'll proceed. And the motion is defeated. And now we're back to the rules as presented, but I think we have provided clarity to the clerk and to, and an expectation that there'll be notifications going out on changes to the agendas, and offer that up as a procedure as we move forward. Supervisor Arstead, please.
Is it time to make another amendment?
We're at that point.
Okey-dokey. Hopefully this one will go quick. I'd like to make an amendment to rule number 6 and rule number 13. Upon reviewing the Rules Review Committee and listening to them talking about the appointment of supervisors, and the chairperson appoints the supervisors to the chair and vice chair. There was an amendment that Corp Council had done, and it was voted down, but I'd like to bring it to light again. On rule number 6A, I would like it to read, appoint supervisors to all standing committees and task force by the standing committees. And I'd like the supervisors to do that with the chair and the vice chair. Going down to rule number 13, AI, it should say chairpersons and vice chairpersons of the standing and program committees and task force shall be elected by a majority vote of the standing program committee or task force at the first scheduled meeting of the subordinate body following the most supervisory election. Terms for each elected chairperson and vice chairperson shall run from the first scheduled meeting of the body to the next supervisory election. So with that change, it would also there would also be a change at the at-large members of the exec would be elected after the standing committees would elect their chair and vice chair.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Supervisor Hardinger with the second. Okay. That motion in a second.
I sure do.
I think what your motion is to change what the practice currently is, and that is the chair, along with the vice chair, offers to, or in state statute, they offer the committee makeup. So the standing committee makeup is by state statute, the chair's responsibility. That comes to the full board. The current practice was that the chair and the vice chair offer to the board the chairs and vice chairs of the standing committees. And your amendment, Supervisor Arstead, is to have the committees elect their chairs and vice chairs, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
Okay. Supervisor Boots, please.
So I don't know if this is such a good idea. I mean, a lot of people in this room don't even know a lot of other people in this room. So leadership typically has been passed down. If we want to do it this way, I guess that's fine. I see it as we've elected our two leaders, our chair and our vice chair, and then we confide in them because it does go to the full board after they appoint the chair and vice chair of the committees. So there is a time at the full board meeting where you can say, no, we can pull that out and say we don't want that person, but I'm confused as to why we're doing it this way, but it's fine.
Supervisor Langenhan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to play this process out because I think this might help demonstrate the decision that the committee made regarding the recommendation to keep the same process with the chair and vice chair working together to make the recommendations. The first one, as Supervisor Boots just noted, is that it is one of somebody having to make the recommendation and not introducing a level of unneeded politics at that first meeting of the standing committee, right? We're all new here. There's no need for divisions to start to permeate on those committees when they get seated. The other reason why historically I haven't supported this change is because of open meetings law concerns. So with this process, Mr. Chair and Corporation Counsel, forgive me if I get this wrong and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if that committee is set, right, that committee of members is set and they have their first meeting, what do you think they're going to do before that meeting? People are going to campaign, right? They're going to call each other. And it's not going to be that hard until you get up to a majority of that committee meeting electronically, right? Because open meetings law isn't just in person, it's electronically too. It won't be that hard. People talk to each other. Some person talks to another person, that person talks to another person. That's the concern I have about this. The other thing I would add is that the board ultimately holds the key to this thing because they confirm the appointments, they confirm the recommendations, right? We have the authority here, the chair and the vice chair don't. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson, please.
Yeah, we elected leadership today, and the decision was to go in a direction. But I think it's important that we trust that leadership team to put together the appropriate people in leadership positions to move this county forward. And by taking it to the committee, let's say somebody was elected chair of two committees, which could happen under our rules. I don't think that's the intent. You want to have people that understand the issues, the processes, and others that can take and advance our strategic plan and move things to fruition. I think that we need to rely upon our leadership to put forth the best names and the most talented individuals for that. We need to continue to develop leadership, but I think we do that through the time-tested and proven way that we've done in the past, and let the chair and the vice chair bring forth those nominations for our approval next week.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Okay, we will proceed to vote. A yes will make the change, a no will not.
Oh, she's on her way back.
Supervisor Lemmer, we're waiting for your vote. And the motion is to change the
No.
and we'll proceed. And the motion is defeated. We're now back to the rules as presented. Supervisor Seibert, please.
Thank you, Chairman Gibbs. I would like to amend rule number 1, 7 p.m. I would like to change that to 6 p.m. And the reason was for some of us that drive over an hour to get here and drive home at 11 o'clock at night in winter when it's blowing and snowing, the security out here sits out there for more time than they need to be, because at 6 o'clock, everybody would be out home by 8:30, 9 o'clock. And that's what I would like to see happen. Thank you.
Okay, the motion is to change the start time of the voters' meeting and the educational meeting from 7 p.m. to 6 p.m. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Ritter. Any discussion? Any discussion? Supervisor Opel, please.
Let's see, I've been here now 10 years. This will be the third time change. And I respect, 6 o'clock would be great, but in my personal realm, 6 o'clock is when we start our town board meetings on every first and third Tuesday. Or not, village board, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting.
Oops.
But we had it right back in 2014 for all the old timers here. We met in the afternoon, 2 o'clock. Didn't interfere with anything. Didn't stop anybody from running because they knew the times. But, if you want 6 o'clock, that's fine. I would just ask our county board chair to maybe flex a little on the first and third, which he's already doing. He's made that commitment. He kind of flexes a little bit. But for those that interfere or collide, I would like to be excused. Thank you.
Supervisor Langenhan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Supervisor Opel, for the history lesson there. I kind of thought that a 2 o'clock motion might be made tonight, and maybe it will yet. I don't know. I guess my question might be for the members of administration. Supervisor Seibert talked about the sheriff staffing out there. Would that 6 o'clock time impact any other staff? And I know you're being asked to call on the spot here, but I'm just curious.
Administrator Leonard, please.
It would impact Corporation Counsel, myself, and the staff from the clerk's office that are up here, as well as any department heads that may need to attend for various items. That said, I think we've made a lot of strides with respect to allowing for virtual attendance for department heads to answer questions if there are questions that come up at the board. With respect to security, I'll plead ignorance here. I believe that the sheriff's office there's a gap between when we close for normal business hours at 4:30 and they probably wrap up around 5, where the individuals are not paid then until we open again, but I'm really not overly sure. I see Kim shaking her head, so she believes that's correct. So I'm not sure there's a fundamental change, other than, of course, I'm sure there's some benefit, like Supervisor Seibert referenced, that they too, if they have to drive home, prefer earlier as opposed to later.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? I think there's several members on this board that serve on other boards, and some serve on the city council. And I know that a 6 o'clock meeting may interfere with them also, but just want to be clear that there is those challenges. But any further discussion? Supervisor Zhang, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this is a new board, but I know that you also sent out a questionnaire in the last board session here. Do you have the results from that at all? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but I'm just kind of curious because I know you also sent out a survey asking for the board's what their start time as well. I'm just kind of curious as well.
Yeah, that was set out during rules review, and I don't remember. I know it was all over the place, but there was no majority that wanted to move it. I think the majority of that board survey was to keep it the same. Although there was also probably multiple rural supervisors asking to move it up. I think historically, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon a long time ago, and we moved it to 7 o'clock, but it also tried to accommodate people that worked, and that was why they went to 7 o'clock. Members that have family, that are taking care of children, I think it's the will of the board. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All right, the motion before you is to move the start time to 6 p.m. On both the education meeting and the voters meeting. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. 6 p.m. will be the start time. Okay. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Okay. The rules are before you as amended. Any further discussion on the rules? Supervisor Opel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. Years ago, when we did change that time, when it was brought before the board, the old board couldn't make the change for the new board. Is it a timing issue? Or is it because we're just starting now that we can change that time?
Well, the old board rules reviewed the time, and there was no consensus to move it. And so there was no, and it does require a 2/3 majority to change the rule during the session after the rules have been adopted. And so there was not enough consensus to request a move back then. And this is a new board. It's simply a requirement of 50% while we're adopting these rules. Once the rules are adopted, it's a 2/3 majority to change the rules. Okay. Any other discussion on the rules as presented now? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote on the adoption of the rules.
Supervisor Wilhelm, have you, oh, he stepped out. Supervisor Hagan, did you vote? Supervisor Hagan, did you vote?
Supervisor Hagan?
Did you vote?
Please vote.
All right.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. Thank you. And we will move on to education presentations. Board education on the process. Back up. Board education on the process of submitting requests on mileage and expense reimbursement through Workday. And the administrator will give us a demonstration and also provide a little bit of clarity. As the rules are written, they're now, the submissions are quarterly. We're using Laserfish, and that is now changed. We're going to be using Workday as your submission for your mileage reimbursement requests, and they still are on a quarterly basis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will attempt to use technology here, so please bear with me. Because each of you have iPads, I just want to show you what it's going to look like ultimately when you log into the system that Chair Gibbs was referencing, and fingers crossed. If it works, it's all me. If not, Jerry Klein's in the back. It works. So this is Clerk Trueblood's iPad, but if you don't have the Workday application on your iPad, we will communicate with you on how to do that and get that added. And I'm not going to go into detail today, but as Chair Gibbs just referenced, in the rules you just adopted, there is a procedure in section 2.01 sub 20 that talks about your submission of mileage and other expense reimbursements. And we're going to put together based on how this will look on your iPads, a job aid, so you have some very clear directions, and we'll also evaluate having a short video to help you do it. That said, I'm not going to go through that today. I'm just going to really show you what the icon looks like and give you a sense of how really user-friendly the application is. Far more user-friendly, I think, than the Laserfiche option, which, in my opinion, was still better than the old way we had, which was paper, which was really intensive for Kim and her team to approve. So we're making those iterative steps of improvement. So the Workday application here is at the bottom of the screen. You'll see it's the W with the kind of half circle across the top. So if you click that, you'll see this will open, and you may have to do an initial logon like you do here. And Kim's got her multi-factor authentication, which we'll also talk about at some later date. Don't want to belabor the point here, but you click this Employees with Active Directory link at the top. Oh, I got to type now. Oop. So you'll enter your email and then hit the next button, and then Kim's going to enter her password, but not so that all of us can read it. So then this is the multi-factor authentication, which for Kim goes to her phone. You'll ultimately, she'll enter this number and we'll get logged in here. But again, this is just going to show you really how user-friendly this app is that'll be on your iPads. So you'll see there's 3 things for you to enter to start: time tracking, pay, and absence. Great news for all of you. You don't need to enter any of that. You'll click the View All. And ultimately, the thing we're going to put together the job aid for is this expenses icon that you see in the second row, second from the left. So if you click that, it will take you to an expense report, and that's the terminology that we're referring to. So you're going to create an expense report, and again, I'm not going to go through this in detail today. We'll make sure that there's pre-populated information, so you don't need to know where the mileage is being paid from. You don't need to know your rate. That will already be in there. Essentially, what you're going to be asked to enter is information about the trip itself, which is in your rule, how far you're driving from your home to the meeting, or if you're not at your house, to the meeting and it's a lesser distance than your home, you'd be claiming that. So ultimately, we'll put that job aid together. We'll make sure within the job aid, you can log your information in the application and just keep adding to your expense report until the end of the quarter, or you can keep track of that information separately, enter it once. We'll give you that job aid, but it's, again, from my perspective and from the staff perspective, we found it to be much more user-friendly and exceedingly fast. It'll get added as soon as you process it, as soon as our next check run is, you'll have that automatic deposit within your account. So more information to come. The end of the quarter for this quarter doesn't end until July 15th. And then you have 2 weeks after that pursuant to your rules. Oh, you have until July 15th to enter it. So the quarter ends at the end of the month. You'll have until July 15th. We'll have a bunch more information before then, but just wanted to get this in front of you. The other thing we'll put in that job aid is really clear information to put in the memo line. We'll tell you what each of the areas need to be filled out. So not going to be a quiz after this, just really wanted to get it in front of you to show you how it's going to look on your iPad. And if you do have any questions, as we get closer to that end of quarter, and when that end of quarter happens, we'll make sure from a staff perspective we can assist you with that. That's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I just remind each of the supervisors that to keep track of the number of meetings that you're attending that are assigned. So the orientation, if you just keep track of those, and through the quarter, through June 30th, and then you can submit them. Once we give you the additional training, then we have the rest of it set up, you'll be able to actually do a interim report and just continue to add to it. So it'll make actually keeping track of your mileage and your reports, your expense reimbursement requests as a task, and not have to complete it until after the quarter ends. So, any questions on that process? Supervisor Sorbert.
Is Laserfish done now? We're not using that anymore for April, May, and June?
Correct. Laserfish is done, starting with this board, and we will be using, well, you'll be using for any meetings, any carryover supervisors for April meetings. You'll be submitting those through Workday for April, May, and June. You'll be submitting those by July 15th through Workday. But we'll have additional training for the supervisors when we get closer to the 15th.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is just an education for the board. The leadership of the board will be sending out a request for you to provide feedback to the board leadership as far as your committee preferences. That email will go out, and please take and pay attention to that email and get that information back as soon as possible. It will have a description on each of the standing committees and the roles that those committees have as far as the departments. And then there also is all of the subordinate committees that we have. And it also asks for a little bit of information as to what relevance you have or importance or any skills that you have that you may feel that are important for board leadership to take into consideration when it makes its recommendations back to this board as far as those committee assignments. I take pride in the last term, the committee assignments. We tried to, and we did. We were pretty successful in getting your first or second choices as committees. That may change, obviously, with 14 new board members, and so committees may change as well. So again, pay attention to your email. You'll be getting that email. It's a click on the standing committee after you put in your pertinent information. You click on the standing committee and you drag it, and it'll put it in preference order 1, 2, and 3. And then it also gives you the ability to select any additional subcommittees that you may have interest in. Supervisor Opel, please.
I guess the question I would have, would meeting times remain the same of those committees that were established in the last tour?
They were adopted by the board rules, so they would be staying the same right now.
Okay, good.
Yep. So the committees are spelled out. The committee meetings are spelled out in our board rules as to which those meeting times are, and what dates they fall on. So again, try to get those in as quickly as possible. I will consult with the vice chair to try to find time when he and I can get together. But I would like to try to have those hopefully back by at least Thursday at noon. So if you could please pay attention to your emails and your committee preferences and get that email back to me so that we can correlate that information so that we can work on the committee assignments to be brought back to this board for the next Tuesday's meeting. Now we will move on to item E. Information discussion regarding the agenda items for the Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024 meeting. So this is where we review any of the agenda items that are going to be voted on. So this is time for questions or ask questions on any of the items. So we'll move on to any questions on item 14E, 14A, Town of Marathon rezone. Tim Vreeland on 4, Diane Leist, ordinance 12-24. Any questions on that zoning amendment? Okay, moving on to E, 14B, the Town of Plover rezone. Sean Jensen, ordinance 13-24. Any questions on that zoning amendment? Moving on to item 15, resolutions, Environmental Resources Committee, approval of the Town of Weston local zoning ordinance amendment, resolution 17-24. Any questions on that resolution? Okay, moving on to item 15B, Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee. Consideration of whether to allocate an additional $20,000 of opioid litigation settlement funds for the purposes of completing the gap analysis of the continuum of care for treatment and recovery for Marathon County as called for in Resolution 1-24. Any questions? Supervisor Marash, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would like, first of all, to have a little bit of an explanation for the additional 20,000 request, and then also a procedural question, because originally the public safety was involved in approving the 50,000 for the gap analysis, and we met last Wednesday, right before HR, Finance, and Property. And this is just for, like I said, procedural and helping everybody, the new members included, understand the whole procedure. So I'm wondering why Public Safety wasn't notified of this change or this additional ask for the 20,000 since we were involved in the original approval. Thank you.
I'll have Administrator Ledner address that.
I'll start with the first question first. In your packet, there should be, I believe it's on page 130 is the resolution. Bear with me just a moment. 129. There are several just summary slides that we put in that were developed by the individuals that conducted the review of the request for proposals. So just a little bit of history on this. Marathon County did participate in the opioid litigation that was largely coordinated by the Wisconsin Counties Association in the state of Wisconsin. And as part of the settlement, Marathon County will continue to receive settlement funds for quite a number of years. Those settlement funds are limited, relatively limited in scope as to what they can be utilized for. So the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which is the acronym you see there on the first slide, the CJCC, undertook an evaluation of what are the needs in Marathon County, what are the available uses for those funds, and through a facilitated process came up with a series of recommendations that ultimately went, as Supervisor Marash referenced, to Public Safety and to the Health and Human Services Committee. Ultimately, the recommendation of the CJCC, the first recommendation, was to conduct the gap analysis referenced by Chair Gibbs in the agenda item title, as well as referenced within the resolution. The initial proposed resolution called for the allocation of $50,000 of those funds for that continuum of care gap analysis. Our staff did put together a request for proposals to essentially go out to market to try to find an entity to do that. We did so, and as referenced believe it's on the second slide. Yes, 7 submissions were returned, reviewed, and graded based on the guidelines by staff from the District Attorney's Office, the Justice Systems Coordinator, and then also our Health Officer. Collectively, the 3 of those members went through that activity, and ultimately their consensus was the top submission meeting all of the requirements cost $70,000, and their recommendation was to come back and utilize $20,000 of additional funds to essentially get that high-quality evaluation as opposed to selecting a proposal of lesser quality. So that's the background as to why the recommendation from staff was brought before the HR Finance and Property Committee. I don't, that was just an oversight. If there's a desire to refer this back to have additional committees look at it, you certainly can do that. Again, the facts of the situation are relatively straightforward. We can move forward with a gap analysis that, from our initial determination, from staff's determination, really doesn't yield all of the information that was originally intended for a lesser cost, or we can utilize the additional $20,000 that is proposed of those settlement funds to get that higher quality evaluation. I don't know if there are additional questions. I can also pull up, and if anyone has any desire for additional information within the public safety packets and Health and Human Services packets, there's an overview of the amount of funds that Marathon County has received to date. If that's of interest to you, I can certainly get that and send that additional information to the board. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Supervisor Boots?
Yeah, I think it'd just be a good exercise to take it back to committee, just for the simple fact that it'll bring the new public safety, whatever that makeup is, just to have them go back through it. Is it going to slow anything down on our end is my question for process.
I don't know that off the top of my head. I can confer with the individuals from the DA's office, the health officer, and the justice coordinator. Actually, she's out of the office, but I can confer with the other 2 to see if there's any issue with the dates for those proposals, if they had a expiration date as to when their proposal must be accepted by, and I can bring that back to you for your next meeting.
And that's one thing that I guess I'd like to bring up while we bring this up is we do that a lot now. It seems in the last couple of years we've said, okay, we're going to limit it to 50,000 or 70,000. Well, coming from an RFP that I answer RFPs, that's hard to do when you really don't know what that number's coming back at. Are we going to bring it back to committee every time we have this type of thing? So maybe we should give some sort of leeway to administration in the future. But for now, I think just as a process thing, we should bring it back to public safety.
Supervisor Cavalli, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I agree with Supervisor Boots and Marash. The 7 submissions returned, reviewed, and graded based on guidelines by 3 Marathon County staff members. Out of those 7 submissions, it says the top submission meeting all the requirements was $70,000. Were there any other submissions under $70,000 that met the requirements or not? Or is that what that means?
I wasn't involved in the grading of the proposals. I can check on that and get you an answer by your meeting next week.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we will move on then to Human Resources, Finance, Property Committee, Public Safety Committee, 15C1, a resolution directing staff to proceed with the offer to purchase for the Regional Forensic Science Center property, Resolution 19-24. Administrator Leonard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And there is a presentation within your packet. I think it's so good it's in twice. But I'm going to just really quickly go through a little bit of background on the Regional Forensic Science Center. I know the vast majority of you in this room have heard this information from myself multiple times, so I'm not ignorant to that fact. I'll try to be relatively brief here. But for the new supervisors, I did pass out a kind of informational packet that staff from my office, along with staff from the medical examiner's office, have utilized as we've engaged the public and other local entities, as well as the state of Wisconsin and other potential stakeholders on this project as we've moved through the fundraising process, which again, I'll quickly go through today. But essentially, beginning with the end in mind, why are we here? It's really, the presentation is for the next 2 agenda items that you have that you'll consider next week. One relates to the purchasing of land for the facility, and the second is the calls for the creation of a forensic pathologist position within the medical examiner's office. I'll start with the land. It's a function of state statute that when the county is purchasing land, it's going through the county board. And I'll talk a little bit more about who we're going to purchase that land from. The second piece is your board rules require anytime there's a new position being created that you take that through the county board. Again, that's an operational piece, but those are the 2 areas that why I'm giving you this presentation. This project, as you'll hear about in just a moment, began as the Corporation Council referenced in your rules discussion a great many moons ago. In fact, at the time, the board vice chair, I think he was the chair of public safety at the time, Chair McEwen, began that process back in 2017. So this is the longest existing task force as far as I'm aware in Marathon County's storied history. But it really began with trying to solve the problem that we were having an increasing number of autopsies that are required by Jess's office, and Jess is in the back. You can, Jess, you want to wave for everyone? She's our medical examiner. That we, by law or best practice, should be performing. And as I'll talk about later, you'll see in one of the slides, there are a very small number of facilities across the state of Wisconsin that perform that work, that do forensic autopsies. And in fact, they're in southern Wisconsin, southeastern Wisconsin, and relatively recently, in the last couple of years, one was opened in Brown County. So the task force began meeting about this challenge back in 2017. They've had the assistance of local business planning and accounting work with Wifley. And then throughout this process, the project, and this is my characterization, really has evolved over time to where I think you have really the best iteration of it coming forward. Public safety has been receiving these updates for a number of years. But essentially where we are now is it is evolved beyond just the core process of what county governments do with respect to forensic autopsy. So when we talk to members of the public, we've referred to this as more than a morgue. And what do I mean by that? I mean that it's beyond just the work that Jess and her team do, the core work of getting a forensic autopsy done. We've really looked at why is there this shortage of forensic pathologists? What other entities are impacted by this apart from just Jess and her team? And what we came to was it's a really widespread problem with roots deep in lack of education and a lack of a pipeline for forensic pathologists. It impacts a wide variety of industries, not just the medical examiner's office, but there's impacts on the medical system. They likewise rely upon autopsies in certain cases to improve medical services over time and medical knowledge, to better understand the reasons underlying why people pass away. It impacts our justice system and the training that's afforded to whether it's our law enforcement, emergency medical services, or our court staff like district attorneys. So throughout that process, we really came ultimately to a partnership with the North Central Technical College, as well as the Medical College of Wisconsin and numerous other entities, including tissue donation, tissue procurement organizations, to really address a whole wide variety of challenges. So the project ultimately moved forward. The county board initially allocated $2 million of American Rescue Plan Act funds to move forward with additional design of the facility. It challenged staff to engage with the state of Wisconsin as well as our federal delegation to try to secure funding, as well as local stakeholders, local leaders. And throughout that process, I'll skip to kind of the next slide here where we talk about funding, which I think is at the end. Very happily, we have secured approximately $12.8 million of the $14.8 million facility. The county board has already pledged to fill that gap, so the project is moving forward. The bids were out for the construction of that facility that's going to be built on the North Central Technical College campus. We anticipate reviewing those in the next couple of weeks and selecting a vendor a construction entity to move forward with that project. So again, the facility was designed and we were guided by the principles that the board put forward in really making it more than a morgue. So you might be asking, why is this happening in Marathon County? I alluded to this already. The central location of that facility will really serve not only Marathon County, but more than 20 counties in the state of Wisconsin and central and northern Wisconsin, as well as counties up into upper Michigan have expressed interest. Our business plan is built on having that forensic pathologist, and in fact, ultimately having 2 forensic pathologists to meet the need not only of Marathon County, but other counties. So that brings us to, again, the why, which I'll jump back up to the resolutions that I referenced before, that we're talking about the land purchase and the forensic pathologist position. So the land itself, again, this is going to be located at North Central Technical College. They've been a great partner thus far in working with us to bring this to fruition. They're going to offer those educational programs in connection with our staff in the facility. But before we build a just shy of $15 million building, I think we all recognize the inherent value of you either own the land you're going to build on, or you have a very long-term land lease to ensure you have continued access to that facility. Those are both viable options to do that as a business. The problem in our situation, or maybe not a problem, but one operative fact is that North Central Technical College can't engage in a long-term land lease with the county. So the only avenue we have is that purchase of the property. The great news, I referenced NTC as a great partner. Every dollar we pay for the land, they're returning into the project in terms of funding for technology within the facility. They are also constrained by regulations relative to North Central Technical College that they need to sell that land for fair market value. So this isn't a situation where, at least from my perspective, my professional advice to you, we don't need to be worried about how much we're going to pay, whether you pay $1 or you pay $400,000, whatever the number we arrive at for fair market value, based on the size of the facility and the amount of land needed, is going to be returned to the county in that state of Wisconsin funding thermometer that I showed you before. It's getting returned to the project. So that's the reason why we're asking to move forward with that land purchase. And I'd engage Corporation Counsel and we'll negotiate that and bring that back to the board. But ultimately, that's the reason for that resolution. And secondly, the forensic pathologist position, again, that's based on your rules. Any new position request needs to be ultimately go through a process set forth in ordinance, specifically 4.20 of your Code of Ordinances, and needs to be approved by the board. There's a memo in your packet. I'm not going to go through it unless you have specific questions, but it lays out relatively succinctly why it makes a lot of sense to bring that position on before the facility is open. And I think many of you have heard that spiel before. But there's, quite honestly, the simple answer is there's a lot of work that needs to be done so that this facility is going to be successful. And again, our goal with respect to this facility is that it is essentially cost neutral for the county. Moving forward, you currently allocate tax levy to the operation of the medical examiner's office. I'd love to tell you that this facility, we're planning to erase that, but that's not the case. It's our goal is really to ensure that it doesn't cost any more tax levy to operate, so we'd be operating at a higher level of service with the same ongoing funding. So I know that's a lot, and again, many of you have heard this spiel a fair number of times. If any of the new members have want additional information, I'm happy to stick around after this meeting or engage with you in a phone call or sit down in my office to talk about it further, or if you do have more detailed questions, Jess is always willing to talk about this project. She has done a great job over the last 7 years to move this forward.
Any questions right now from the board on either of the two resolutions, Resolution 19-24 and 20-24? Supervisor Sorber, please.
Thank you, Chairman Gibbs. The 400,000 that's locked in, is that locked in?
Chris, do you want to, Chris or Mike, do we have the final numbers on the cost for the property?
The $400,000 number. Sorry. The $400,000 number is based off of not only the matching funds that went into the building commission application to get the $7 million from the state, but also taking into consideration the size of the facility plus the parking and secured area and memorial garden. So looking at that, you're looking at approximately 2.5 acres. And when we looked at as the size sort of fluctuated through the conceptual and design phase, and the number for the match contemplated was in that 350 to 400,000 realm. The $400,000 is locked in the sense that it's tied to the building commission application, unless you could find some other way to count some other funds as matching, and then 2.62 acres based on the fair market value that North Central Tech has gone through to get that number reflects that acreage size times the amount. So.
Okay, and the second question, that 14,800,000, that isn't written in black and white either, is it? That could be 18 million, it could be 20 million?
No, as part of the contract moving forward, and we've been very forceful, I guess you could say, about it. At the end of the bid process, what gets written into the contract through the AIA approach is a guaranteed maximum price, and it's going to be 14.8 million or under. And so we have already had discussions about if some bids came in higher, let's say you came in at 15 million, we've already got some things identified on the HVAC side and other parts of the facility to reduce costs to keep it at that 14.8.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Any other questions? Okay, several announcements. Okay, the courthouse will open now at 5:30, half hour prior to our meetings. And next Tuesday will also be the photo for the full board. And so try to be here no later than 5:45 so that we can be organized and have the group photo taken. Also, any supervisors that haven't checked their mailbox in the clerk's office, there is mail in the office in there. And so please, before you leave tonight, check your mailbox. Also, a reminder, please check your emails and get those preferences back to board leadership so they can work on the committee assignments. And then also, you should have received an email late this afternoon about Thursday at 3 o'clock, between 3 and 4. There will be in honor of the Strengthening Families Month, Marathon County Social Services will be hosting Hands Around the Courthouse, and you will also should have received that email with the invitation on it, and you're all invited to participate in that. Any other announcements and/or requests? Seeing none, we are down to the infamous number 17. What is your pleasure? Motion to adjourn by Supervisor Crivelli and seconded by Supervisor Langenhan. No discussion. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.